everyone. Welcome. I am Sueli Bonaparte, founding president of the Brazil-Florida Business Council. I would like to introduce to you Pedro Heroles, partner of Matos Filho, who is going to be moderating today's discussion. To you, Pedro. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Thank you, Sueli. And thanks for everyone who's watching us now. So we'll start our event today, the era of open banking, FinTechs and payments pathways. And to start our event, I'd like to ask a question to Ilan Goldfan. Ilan, in your opinion, what has been and what will be the role of the Central Bank of Brazil in the development and implementation of the open banking ecosystem in the country?
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Sueli. It's a pleasure to be here talking to all of you with all this distinguished panel in the Brazil-Florida Business Council. It is always a pleasure. My role here, as Pedro mentioned, is to talk about what is the role of the central bank, what is the role of the regulation in inducing the open banking. First of all, I would like to say that one of the main goals or the main principles behind the open banking is the fact that the consumer should be the rightful owner of his own data. So his relationship with banks, his credit history, how much he paid, how much he did not pay, what happened to him is the right of the consumer to have. And he can move this data to one bank, to another financial institution, to a FinTech, to whoever he likes. And this principle may sound very simple, but it has an underlying relevance which is very powerful. As we all know from not only the FinTechs, but the big techs, data is very valuable. There's a lot of value there. Data is power. Data is profit. So when the central bank decides to democratize this data, to give this data back to the consumer, it is a very powerful principle, and it will make open banking a very important tool to foster competition, to increase inclusion in the banking system, to reduce cost, and also to have each consumer face its own risk, its own interest rates. So when you ask me what is the role of the central bank, I will tell you, based on this principle, that there are four main roles of the central bank. First, if we are gonna switch data or transfer data from one institution to the other, we need to standardize the information, to have a standard. We cannot have just one institution speak one language, the other institution or financial institution speaks another one. Somebody has to tell everybody that we'll need to speak the same language. Because if you just say transfer data, it's not enough. You need to transfer data in this language, in this format, so that it will be easy for the consumer to own the data and transfer from one to the other. So there's the first role is standard common language. I think this is the most important role. The second role of the central bank is to coordinate when, so that everybody starts at the same time, so that nobody's shy, nobody's worried who's going to be the first one. There's a lot of externalities. It's a public good, open banking. So somebody has to say it's going to start in the 1st of May. There are going to be 4 phases. The deadlines for everybody is this date. So let's start. So first role is standard, same language. Second role is coordinate. Somebody has to say, let's start everybody. The third role is more subtle. We need to give incentives for open banking to actually function. You can have the same language, you can have everybody coordinate at the same dates, but then if you don't tell the consumer, if the consumer does not feel it is his own benefit to ask for the exchange of data, you're not going to have it really functioning. So you have to give incentive, you have to tell the consumer, look, if you foster competition, it will be in your benefit. And the final role is a negative role, which is risks. Once you're transferring data from one place to the other, one big bank to a small bank, a big bank to a payment institution, to a fintech, you need to be careful that you don't get more fraud, more cyber attacks, more thefts. So those are the 4 roles I understand. Same language, same dates, incentive for the consumer to participate and be able to avoid these risks. And what are the objectives? First, that each consumer face its own interest rate. So if you are a low-risk consumer, you get lower interest rate. Second, that if data which is powerful can be distributed, you can get more competition. Here, of course, there are issues that we can talk later. If you don't give any property rights, if you don't give the institutions any reward for the investment, you won't get a lot of data accumulated. And finally, as I mentioned, inclusion. You get bancarization, you get people back into the system. So that's my first introduction, the 4 roles, the objective, and then what we expect from the role of the central bank, more competition, more people involved, more efficiency to the consumer. Thank you. And back to you, Pedro.
Thank you, Ilan. A pleasure and an honor to hear you talking about open banking. Since this project began to be discussed during the time you were president of the central bank, and now we are seeing the project being in course of implementation in the country. So thank you very much for your comments. And
Pedro, I want just to comment, and I'm glad you say it's always an honor. And I think when you work in a public, as a public servant, or in a public office, it is very important to see what you started to have more persistence. What you have started actually get fruits, because everybody can do something and then when you leave, it just dies. But when you see things going and continuing, it's an honor, it's a very pleasure to see it happening.
The honor is all ours. Thank you very much, Ilan. So to move forward with our event, I'd like to hand over to Leandro Villain. So, Leandro, considering that you are director of the Brazilian Association of Banks, in your view, how the banks, the traditional banks, the incumbents in Brazil, are facing the emergence of open banking in Brazil? Is it a threat or an opportunity?
Thanks, Pedro. Thanks, Feli. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. It's a great opportunity to share with you my standpoint, my perspective. Well, first of all, of course, the incumbent banks or the entire banking system has a big challenge to change the way how they have the relationship with the customer. Probably new applications or new front-end communication need to be deployed. And I guess the big winner of this game will be those banks which we can provide the better customer experience, probably. So the customer, finally, of course, the customer expectation will be at the center of this process. And additionally to this position, keep in mind that you have the customer as the owner of its own data. I guess that this combination provides a very good opportunity to the banks for the entire financial system, not only banks but also to FinTechs and all the participants on this process. Because first, I do believe that the open banking will provide a better time to market in terms of new products and services. Considering the technology, the standardization, as Ilan said a few minutes ago, these procedures or these infrastructure, internally speaking, will give to the incumbent banks much more flexibility, much more speed in order to launch new products and new service, combining these APIs and attending the market expectation in terms of new products or new features and much more speed. Second, I guess open banking will provide a much better perspective or knowledge about its own customer. I mean, differently from 20, 30 years ago, today it's absolutely normal that you have part of your relationship or banking necessities attended by one bank, and then you have your credit card in the second one, and then you have a mortgage in a third one, and spreading out all necessities across the market. And then the open banking can provide the opportunity to those banks where you choose to have your main relationship to congregate or to centralize all this information, and then providing a much better understanding about your behavior, your revenues, your profile, and offering better products and service adapted to your necessities. So these customer knowledges will be very good opportunity to the banks to provide a better offerings and products and service. The third one, I guess, is the financial inclusion. It's very important to keep in mind as well that Brazil has a very significant part of its economy by informal activities, which is very difficult to, for example, to provide credit for part of the segment because the bad payment in some segments is very high today. Open banking can provide to the market, to the banks, a much better information about the customer profile. I mean, let's suppose, for example, a taxi driver, which is a very informal activity here in Brazil. Today, it's very difficult to provide algorithms and models to provide credit to this customer. But open banking can provide additional information to those algorithms based on the past revenues from this customer. So said that it probably will be much more precise in terms of its capacity of payment, which conditions to provide this credit. And at the end of the day, you can provide credit for someone which is out of the market in the principle. So the financial inclusion, I guess, it's one of the best opportunities for the banks and achieving markets, which today it's much more difficult to achieve. So, Pedro, answering in a very straight way to your question, I guess open banking, it's much more opportunity for those banks or those participants which believes in this process and have scale to provide or to provide this service to its customer and gathering authorizations and gathering and providing the best customer experience. So at the end of the day, answering your question, I guess it's a big opportunity that we have in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leandro. It's very interesting to hear you because we know that in Brazil we have very solid banks, and this is a very important feature of our financial system in Brazil. And it's good to hear that open banking, as we can see in other countries that are implementing their open banking ecosystem, that already have an open banking ecosystem implemented, will open opportunities for all players, incumbents and new players as well. So thank you very much for your remarks. So to move forward with our event, I will hand over to Thais Mendonça. And Thais, you are head of regulatory Latin America for Stripe, a player that's experiencing a huge growth around the world and in Brazil too. So in your perspective, what are the opportunities and also the challenges that the open banking in Brazil will open to new players?
Pedro, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here in this panel. That's an interesting question. I see that in the last decade, the Brazilian financial and payment systems have gone through a true revolution. New players had an important role in this process, bringing to the table new technologies, innovation, and a new way to serve their customers at the end of the day. In my view, open banking will allow a world of opportunity to these players. But yes, there are indeed many challenges. To start, I think it's important to say that the Brazilian Central Bank is in part responsible for this revolution we've seen in the past years, having fostered so many interesting initiatives under its agenda BC Plus and BC hashtag. So some of the pillars of these initiatives, and I can mention competition, financial inclusion, transparency, allowed us to see the promotion of new technologies and the rising of neobanks and FinTechs in Brazil. For this process to be consistent, I believe that one of the barriers that had to be overcome by new players was information asymmetry. So you had the traditional big banks with strong historical access to consumer information. And on the other hand, you had neobanks and FinTechs, which still had to build first trust, and second, their own set of consumer-based information. In this context, I believe that open banking breaks with the past and sets forth favorable circumstances for more competition, which is amazing for new players. It creates a banking system that is open, transparent, and as Ilan was saying, as Leandro was saying, it greatly empowers consumers in general by making it crystal clear that they own their data, and therefore it's their choice of what they do with that information. If a consumer wants to share their banking information with a FinTech, for example, because they trust this FinTech will be able to provide a useful, innovative service, they can. So that model whereby the traditional bank holds full control of the information and centralizes the consumer's financial life is then replaced by a model whereby information is shared between the best service providers. As I see it, the consumer is in the center of this new relationship. So again, it's very empowering for the consumers. When I think of the opportunities for new players, I think of the variety of business models that will probably arise. So for example, financial management. You have a service provider centralizing all your financial information in a platform and helping you administrate your financial life. Or maybe it's a platform that compares financial products and services that are in the market, providing to its users easy access to the best rates and conditions. Or even something that I'm very excited about, how players will combine Pix, the Brazilian Central Bank's instant payment system, with open banking via payment initiation services, which I believe will create a seamless payment method for e-commerce. And I think it's also worth saying that for me, it's going to be fascinating to see what projects will come out of the Brazilian regulatory sandbox. My impression is that we will see a lot of innovation connected with the open banking ecosystem. So really looking forward to see what's coming out of the regulatory sandbox. The challenges, well, the challenges are so many. Something noteworthy in the Brazilian open banking regulation is that as of today, only financial institutions and payment institutions authorized to operate by the Brazilian Central Bank are allowed to participate in our open banking. The regulator did allow licensed institutions to sign partnership agreements with non-licensed institutions, which in my view is a sign that the central bank doesn't want smaller players to be excluded of the Brazilian open banking. But it will be interesting to see how this will work in practice. I believe it may represent a challenge for new players, many of which may not be licensed yet, because they will have to structure their businesses around some sort of partnership with licensed institutions, which isn't necessarily a piece of cake, not for the FinTechs and not for the big banks, by the way. In my view, we should pay close attention to the development of these partnerships and see how they will impact the participation of non-licensed FinTechs in the open banking. Let's bear in mind that non-licensed FinTechs in Brazil include international payment facilitators, sub-acquirers, and even payment institutions that are not yet subject to regulatory licenses because they're still operating under smaller volumes. These players are most definitely key to innovation and competition in the Brazilian market. And I think they have proved their capacity to generate new technologies and changes in the market. I do think that the central bank recognizes their importance and will be supportive of the diverse ecosystem for our open banking. So hopefully they will keep an eye open to see how these partnerships will develop and be supportive. Something that's also very top of mind for me, and I guess Leandro will probably agree, I don't think it's trivial for new players and for traditional banks as well, by the way, to invest and develop the technology and operational standards that will be used to share information. This is a lot of work for all parties involved. The investment is considerable when you think of information security. And I can only imagine how challenging this must be for new, smaller players. It's very challenging for the big traditional banks. Now, can you imagine a small fintech having to deal with the challenges of information security? It's something to keep an eye also. As a final remark, I'd also say that, well, open banking is still in the first phase of implementation in Brazil. And I'm very keen to see the next stages, which I believe will be more challenging than this first phase, because that's when client data starts being actually shared. However, I don't think open banking is broadly known by the population in general, which might be reluctant to share sensitive data, such as transactional history and information related to their accounts. So I think creating culture is key. I believe the culture change is happening, but continuous financial education for the population in general is key for these initiatives to be successful. I think we saw this with PIX, and I hope that the market in general and the central bank feel the same way about open banking, because I do feel like this is a challenge as well.
Thank you very much, Thais. You mentioned a very interesting fact that we are seeing in Brazil. We had last year some major projects led by the central bank starting to be implemented in Brazil. The instant payments ecosystem, the discussion of the regulatory sandbox, open banking, and this year we are seeing some of these projects being implemented, and now we are about to see the convergence of all these products. So it's a very, very interesting time in Brazil with respect to the financial and payments sectors. So thank you very much, Thais. And to move forward with our event, like to hand over to Ingrid Barth. So, Ingrid, as director of the Brazilian Association of FinTechs, we know that you are actively participating in the discussions of the governance of the open banking ecosystem in Brazil. So, I'd like to ask you, what are being the main challenges for the fintechs with respect to the governance of the open banking ecosystem in the country, and also how is being managed the balance of powers between the incumbents and the new players?
Hello, thank you so much for the invitation also. It's an honor for me to be part of the board of the open banking with the central bank. It's a pleasure to be witness of this revolution that we are in phase, not only the open banking, but I believe that open banking, it's open a new era of financial market in Brazil, like, for example, the Plano Real and our actual currency. So it's an honor to be part of that, especially representing the fintechs, because I believe we as fintech, we are part of this revolution, not only part, but we can change the situation with technology. We can include more technology education also for customers, people, and the financial market. And talking about the relationship with the governance, with the incumbents, I don't think, especially it's my personal opinion, I don't think it's a game that we can have only one win. We can have a lot of wins, parts that can provide a better situation for the customer, new players doing a very good job, innovation. So it's a situation that we can have more solutions than just only one win. And then my opinion related to governance and relationship and challenges related to open banking is very similar to Thais, that Thais said. But I want to say one of them that it's most, for me, it's the most important thing is the education. Not only financial education, for sure we have this lack in the education in Brazil, but also data education, especially because we are not so familiar as society with this data education, data governance in our lives. And we needed to show to people and fintechs and incumbents, everyone, that it's a very good thing that we needed to do, but it's a very big responsibility to handle your own data. So we needed to understand these agreements. We needed to understand who will share our information, what information is sharing, what type of businesses we can do with this information. So all of these rules should be very clear to the client, to the customer. And I know that, for example, especially fintechs clients, they normally they are very excited by technology, by applications itself. But we have a lot of people in Brazil, a large part of clients in Brazil, customers in Brazil, that we need to provide this education. I believe FinTech is doing very well this type of education because the client is the center of this relationship, and we are very care about that because we are new players, and then we needed to pass this security and this education to be strong, to do a very good job in our society. Also, I believe that this can provide confidence by the clients. So governance between banks, fintechs in the open banking space should have confidence, because if you don't have confidence, we don't have engagement from the clients. So it's important to do what we are doing to have a very good regulation for open banking, our engagement like a players that wanted to have this type of products, that we want, for example, to have new innovations, products, and everyone that we want to contribute in open banking, but we need to have the engagement from the customers. Without customers, we don't have any products, any open banking. So I believe we need to, we are doing it in the board, in open banking, in the work that we are doing, but it's important to reinforce this type of importance, because without confidence, without engagement, we don't have this product. It's like, for example, if you compare with Pix, we are having a lot of engagement. We need to do the same very good job with the open banking, and then it's not a job just for fintechs or just for incumbents. It's a job that we need to do together, especially with the central bank that is doing a very good job on that. But it's a challenge because Brazil is too big. We have a lot of profiles. We have a lot of types of problems that can be an opportunity, but we need to pay attention on that. And for the last point that I wanted to say, it's related to client experience. I know that my colleagues said a lot about that, but for fintechs especially, client experience, it's not just a small piece. It's everything about the client experience. So the client experience can provide more engagement, can provide more education, financial education, data education. So the experience, it's not only related to a good app, or, for example, a good website. The experience is the end-to-end process. So the way that we explain to the client when the client call the fintech or the bank, or the way that we explain products, the way that we can explain agreements, it's very, very important. It's a challenge because, as I said, Brazil is too big, totally different types of view, but it's important to take care about this experience, to have success in more players in the market, and everyone can be part of this transformation.
Thank you, Ingrid. Great to hear this perspective from the FinTechs standpoint. And it's very interesting. You mentioned Pix, and we had in Brazil, in the beginning, some criticism related to the fact that the central bank was leading the instant payments ecosystem in Brazil and its implementation. And we are now seeing that it's showing as a huge success. So we have a lot of people adhering to the real time payments system in Brazil. So this shows the potential for new business models, for new technologies, and how it can really be adhered by the consumers in the country. So thank you very much, Ingrid. So to finish the first part of our event, I would like to pass the word to Giba Martins. And Giba, Since 2019, the Central Bank of Brazil, in the first communication to the market, limited the scope of the open banking ecosystem to authorized entities. So we lefting out some players that are not authorized or regulated by the central bank. So I'd like to ask you, do you, in your view, do you think that the scope of participants of the open bank ecosystem in Brazil is adequate? And in a broader perspective, what are, in your opinion, the strengths and the weaknesses, if any, of the open banking model that's been implemented in Brazil?
Thank you, Pedro. I want to give a special thanks to Sueli for the invite, our chairwoman here. Thank you so much, Sueli, President Ilan as well, and all our distinguished colleagues here. Thank you so much for the invite. So first, Pedro, it is so hard to be the last, right? The last, but not the least here. And moreover, after so many information and so many rich points and a lot of knowledge that we heard just right now from the participants, it's so hard to me. It is a challenge because many of my points it's already put in the table for most of participants here. But let me try ask your question from my standpoint. So, and I have been working for in those 20 years for banks, acquirers, brands, and now I'm in FinTech. I'm a FinTech guy, literally, with the jacket, but a FinTech guy. So I have a kind of ambiguous vision about that because at a first sight I saw maybe as a not good measure from the central bank to limitate non-financial institutions and also FinTechs to directly integrate the open banking ecosystem. However, on the other hand, I understand perfectly from the regulator that Brazil, it is not for beginners, right? And we have a very strong central bank in Brazil, very strong. And the central bank has been doing a very serious, very relevant, and very respectful job in Brazil, considering the past few years. So I understand some fears from the regulator, right, involving not only the operation and not only data privacy, but also in terms of healthy of the financial ecosystem, right? So choosing only authorized institutions, for me, considering the whole scenario and our financial past, makes sense, right? In this way. So I understand, and I am enthusiastic of the open everything in Brazil because I think we are moving forward to that and fast, right? So we are talking here about open banking, but we also have instant payments as the PIX tools. We are discussing our FX reform now. We are just discussing even the ATM scheme, open scheme in Brazil, and other very relevant discussions in Brazil that is in place, involving cryptocurrencies as well, involving a proper digital official coin from the Brazilian Central Bank, which is very relevant. Also, international remittances with PIX, like a PIX, international PIX, right? So, my point is, I truly believe in the central bank works, right, and vision to, in this phase, at least at the beginning, to only allows authorized banks and financial institutions to operate the open banking. It is like President Ilan said, it is very sensible, very relevant to keep this ecosystem alive, especially with the data that the banks and the financial institutions, and we cannot forget that the banks and the financial institutions, like Leandro also said, they have been doing that kind of job to treating data, to treating information for so many years, right? Because they, of course, they are regulated in Brazil for so many years since the beginning, right? So, so for me, it makes sense for now to have banks and financial institutions in this phase. But of course, I want to see, I would like to see the integration of FinTechs, and we have now. It is very important to say, Pedro, that we are not living in a regulatory desert in Brazil for FinTechs. Otherwise, we are living a very regulated environment in Brazil for FinTechs and payment institutions. You know that very well. So I think we are in the right path to become speaking as a FinTech, right, in this moment, right? I think we are in the right path to be prepared to integrate the open banking system in Brazil. But for now, for me, makes sense, right? It was a precise decision from the central bank. It is my vision. About the strengths, Pedro, I think it is a lot of strengths, right? We cannot forget again about our past, right? We are just right now in this movement of revolution of our market, which it is a concentrated market and with a lot of verticalizations, right? In a lot of points of our ecosystem here, not only financial purely, but also in payments. So open banking is a revolution in that way. So, and I think open banking doesn't solve the traditional Brazilian credit problem in Brazil, right? But it's a very, very important step, right? Very important step. Credit in Brazil is expensive, it's hard to obtain, and we don't have the spread of credit like we have, for example, in US and other countries in the world. So, but definitely it is a very, very good step to revolution, to bring lower prices, to bring better costs, including technology, including financial, not only technology, but financial inclusion, digital education to the Brazilian population. So, and this is a mix of everybody said here. So I think competition is the key word from my perspective, competition, because we are going to have banks, we're going to have payment institutions alongside the banks, the authorized ones, yes, but we're going to have. So competition brings a lot of benefits for the end user or the consumer in the end of the day. So two more points beside competitions. I think interoperability, right, is a very important tool that came up with the open banking. So this integration with instant payments, open banking, and other open everything systems that we're going to have in Brazil. This is very, very important. And my last point is about, I think we are moving forward to open everything ecosystem in Brazil. And I think the central bank needs to implement some hard rules, right? And I understand the pain and the scars for the new ones, for the FinTechs. So I'm a part of a FinTech as well. But I think it is necessary to bring more security for the system, healthy financial ecosystem. And I understand that we need to do this step by step. So, of course, we are hungry as a FinTechs, as a non-financial institutions to embrace all. But I'm very partiary of the the central bank vision to do some openings in parts, step by step. So that's my vision about it. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, Giba. With that, we finished the first part of our event. And now, in the second part of our event, each of our speakers will have the opportunity to ask a question to another speaker. So the other speaker will have up to 2 minutes to answer the question. So we'll follow the same order of our first part. So we'll start with Ilan. Ilan, please ask your question as you deem convenient.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask a question specifically, but my specific to anyone in particular, but you can jump in and answer. My vision of open banking is that you need a balance. You need somehow to enhance competition, push forwards toward everybody to participate. But on the other hand, the security issues, frauds, and legal issues regarding data transference and all of this. So I want to ask, on one hand, the ones that are in the fintech business and in the more, I'll say, less incumbent, do they see the balance? And I want to ask whoever is representative of the banks or want to answer regarding the banks, maybe Leandro from FEBABAN, to ask, do you see the balance, or do you think it's pushing too much from the incumbents and risking too much in terms of the open banking? So this is a question for the two sides. Do you see the balance or not, or you think it's to one side or the other?
As a suggestion, I'd like to hear Leandro and Ingrid to answer this question.
Oh, for ladies first, please.
Okay. Yeah, I believe the way that, especially central bank, it's not because you are here, Ilan, but it's true. Especially the way the central bank is organizing and handle the open banking. I believe there is a lot of balance. And why? Nowadays, we have, for example, a chair specifically for FinTechs, that I'm part of that. And we have, for sure, Leandro can talk more about that, the share specifically for FEBABAN and incumbents. And then these shares, we have the same power of vote. We have 1 vote each share. So this balance is providing with this type of democracy inside the open banking, because we have our rules and responsibilities as fintech. I know that incumbents banks have these rules and responsibilities, and we are trying to manage all these rules and responsibilities to have the solution and the best option for the customers, for the market, for sure, and for each player that is part of the open banking. So I believe we are doing a very good job as players and as part of that. For sure, there is no 100% of yes all the time or 100% of no all the time. But I believe the way that we are dealing with it, it's very good for the objective, for the way that we are building and the success for the open banking in Brazil. So for sure, responding directly, for sure we have this type of questions and discussions, but in the final of the process, the response is always good for the project itself.
Let me answer your question, answering in 2 parts. From the technology perspective, we are secure that we can provide all the security around these data transfer. The data transfer process, you have environment, you have technology today to provide in a very secure channel with cryptography and all the stuff around this around this process. Open banking is being implemented in 4 phases, right? So far, so good. The second phase will be deployed on July 15, and all the specification is ready and already regulated. So let me say, so from the technology perspective, the phase 2, which is the data sharing process, is secure and fine. The phase 3, which is the payment initiation, is under development. Is not ready, so I'm not in position to say if it's secure or not. But I can share to you saying the technology today provides all the tools necessary to have a secure ecosystem. However, my second part of the answer is it secure? Once the process of data transmission is ready, I guess that Ingrid touched something very important in regards the data education customer. So the point here is how secure is the data recipient participant? This is something that the central bank, it's a point that have to be monitored by the central bank, because once we transfer the data to some participant, some fintech, we have to ensure this repository or this environment is so secure as the original participant. So at the end of the day, what we are saying is that it's very important to keep the same baseline to all participants, no matter the size it represents to the market, because the open banking represents only one ecosystem or only one arena. So it's very important to see the purpose of this data usage, the security of this recipient, what's its compliance against the GDPR, the equivalent of GDPR here in Brazil. So we have a lot of topics to be observed after the process of data transmission. And I guess that it's very important to the customer to pay attention. Once he's providing his consent, it's very important to notice the purpose of the data, what kind of data he's sharing, this customer is authorizing, how long time this recipient will keep this information, is it secure? This participant is secure enough, is robust enough. So I guess it's a learning process of these after the transmission process. The transmission is fine, is the last piece that will be concerned at this point, because the technology, as I said, is very robust.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I will ask now Leandro and then Thais, Ingrid, and Gilberto to ask a question to other speaker who will have up to 1 minute to answer, and then we will read some questions of our audience before we finish our event. So, Leandro, please.
I will not lose the opportunity to make a question to Ilan here, and Ilan, of course. You are, since you have the central bank, you were at the central bank as a former president at that time. What was your perception? What we have the first contact with open banking, and what make you to engage this process or push hard this process at that time? And what benefits that you of course in the first time, I could guess that at that time probably you see some benefits in the first hand, but probably along the time you have a learning curve. And what was your perception in 2008, or maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure about the year, but or something 2016 or something like that? What was your perception at time in terms of opportunities to the market?
Well, Leandro, I think the perception was twofold. One is the realization that the financial system is quite stable and solid in Brazil. We had our banking crisis in the past, in the 90s, and after a while, the perception is that stability is there, financial stability somehow. Of course, you can never be sure of anything, but for whatever we can say, it was relatively stable. At the same time, there was a perception that we need to deal with the cost of the system, the high spreads, the need to induce competition, to allow new entrants. All of this was part of it. And there was a need to deal with all the components of the cost. So on one hand, you could say the regulatory cost, the reserve requirements, the mandatory lending, and whatever you want was there. But part of it, of course, is we need to give some oxygen to the system. And the way to do it is to find ways to foster inclusion, to foster competition. And when we were there, we were looking at open banking. It was not widespread. You have it more in the UK, in Europe than in the US. You are not the first one to do it, and you can see what are the results somewhere else. So that's the first perception is we are solid, we have a safe financial system, and we need to reduce spreads and costs and high interest rates and to foster competition. So there is a room where you can go there and do your agenda, BC Plus or BC, where you have to do it in a structural manner. That's first. Second, of course, is experience somewhere else, and you say, well, that's where we are. Third, all this issue about data transfer, data protection, and this is not the financial system issue, it's a more general issue. And in Brazil, you have approved the data protection law. So my view is that open bank is part of this environment on data issues and data protection, on the global system, thinking about the consumer being the owner of the data. So that is the perception. So to summarize to you, competition versus stability, open banking already existed, and data issues, data protection going all the way. So when you look at it and say, this is where we need to go, let's do it in a structural way, let's pace it, let's not do it everything in one day, let's have phases. A lot of stuff that we created are only being implemented now, some years later.
Thank you, Leandro. Thais, please, your question.
I will repeat what Leandro said. It's just an honor to have Ilan here at this panel. So I'm going to have to ask a question to him. Ilan, my perception is that the Brazilian Central Bank both learned from international experiences, but also listen to the local market players before implementing open banking regulation, similar to what they did with PIX. If you think of the public consultation period before the regulation was enacted, and also the creation of the governance structure that Ingrid and Leandro made reference to. Even though this process probably ended up taking more time, I do have the impression that our regulation ends up being more solid since it incorporates this entire cycle of learnings, both international and domestically. And I'd love to hear your perception of that. Was that intentional? How did the central bank think of that at the time? Of course, you paved the way for all the innovations that we're seeing. So I'd love to hear your perception.
Well, Thais, I need to say here that a lot of on the open banking final steps, or a good part of it, was done by the current administration. We launched it, but they are doing a very good job in promoting and implementing and looking at the data in terms of can you do it? What is the velocity? What I can tell you is that it's always an issue to be able to hear all the participants, and when you hear the participants, they always, and I think it's natural, they always see the regulation and see the world from their point of view. So let me give an example, which is very known. There's always this complaint about regulatory arbitrage, that the newcomers, that the FinTechs are less regulated, that they pay less taxes, that they have less, and those are the big banks, and that's the way they see it. And you need to be at the central bank and be able to hear the issues and to try to find a balance. I'll give you an example which is very specific. One of the main complaints on open banking is that it opens a Pandora box for security breaches. That data is going to somehow, once you get out of the system which is most secure and go to the institutions that are less secure, you open spaces and breaches where attacks will happen, hackers will happen, fraud will happen. What do? Do you agree completely and say, well, there's no open banking, let's stop? But what if you go too fast and suddenly you get a major attack? So here is where my first question was important. Where's the balance? What is the speed you advance? So Jiva was saying, well, I understand why the central bank is not introducing institutions that are not regulated yet. Yes, if you're not regulated, you are both fearful about that. And then in the balance, you say, well, let's leave them for the next step. So that's the answer for you, Thais. It's always, you need to have your 2 ears, you have to hear, but you have to somehow look for the balance. Don't ignore the risks, but don't stop you in your direction.
Thank you. Thank you, Thais. Ingrid, your question.
For sure, my questions for Ila. I have a lot of questions for sure, because as part of this work on open banking, we wanted to understand the first beginning of the project. So the first conversation about that, the first step to start the project, who was involved, and fears and challenges and everything that you wanted to say. And another question is, now outside to central bank, what's your perception of this work that we are doing in open banking in the board, and what your perception of the society, how the society is feeling the open banking? Not only the players, but customers and future users.
So Ingrid, I think your job at the being part of this board is very important. I think the board will need to help the central bank. Central bank cannot see everything. It needs the board to direct and to help. So that your work is quite important. When do you start to think about open banking? So that's the first question. How does it appear? First, it is important to have, and here I need to give a compliment to the central bank staff, the public servants. They are there, they are thinking about the issue, and they immediately start talking about open banking, even before we as the directors or the president, even before we start telling them, go to that direction, they already were thinking about that. And you must say, well, but where are you getting there? How do you think? Well, the central bank is very involved in international forums. So, for example, at least every 2 months, the president and directors will go to, used to go, now with the pandemic, it's everything Zoom, I'm sure. But we used to go to Basel, and we sit in Basel and we talk to all the central banks, and everybody will tell, and somebody will say something about open banking, because he will be in the middle of the open banking, with criticism, with issues, and then you will have some panel that will just talk about open banking. And you look at that, and maybe in the first day you'll say, open what? But then you'll talk about it, you realize there's something going on, you'll come back and you ask your staff, and your staff will say, yes, we were thinking about that. This is where we're going to say, well, so let's think about it, let's plan. Let's be part of our agenda because this is very important to us. How are you going to do it? And then you start planning. So international connection, it's very important. So Brazil to be open in all the areas is very important. So central bank is a very open in the sense we are very connected. If this will have happened in all the directions in the Brazil economy, it will be very good because you oxygenate, you get the ideas. You're not the first one to do. Sometimes you are the first one to do. For example, all these S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, the way we divided it, and we did the proportionality, which is the regulation dependent. If you are an S1, if you're an S2, if you're S3, S4, that we introduced the BIS before they even talk about proportionality. When we got there, they basically were thinking about Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3, implementation, how do we do it, how do we agree? They were not really thinking about proportionality. And for some reason, it was more in our head when we brought it. So first answer is international, things happen, and have a good staff. That's the elements. And then I think that your second question was, after that, what was your second question? I'm sorry.
Now your perception and what you think that people are feeling and thinking about the work that we are doing now.
Yeah, I think there is a very good environment, a very good excitement by the market, by the participants. Everybody is very into it. It's still not a society general issue. This is where we need to do a better job. We need to, I see a lot of questions here about education, about financial education. That's something that needs to be done because you can do all the framework, all the infrastructure. It's like building these big roads and nobody puts the car in it. We need to put the guys in the infrastructure, and that will need to be done. And looking from the outside, I also see that there is fear. People will not talk it here, but there is a fear. Where are we going? Are we going too fast? Is it going to be okay or not? So it's always good to hear and pace and do it in a manner where you are learning as you go, but you do it in a manner that is safe.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Ilan. Before we move to the next question, Leandro informed us that he has to leave us for another meeting. So I'd like to thank you very much, Leandro, for your participation. Thank you. An honor to have you here with us today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I do apologize. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Leandro.
So now, Giba, please, your question.
So following my colleagues, of course, address it to President Ilan. President, you may agree that we still have the credit problem in Brazil, the access to credit and to other financial products in Brazil. And you may agree as well that open banking, it's a huge revolution in that way. So thinking about futurology, President, what would be the next steps of the financial revolution inclusion in terms to giving more access to credit, in terms to give more financial empowerment to Brazilian citizens? What is your view about it?
Well, I will say that there is the fast lane and the slow lane. They're both happening, but what is the classic way? Financial education, reach out to anybody. You know that when we were there, we included financial education is part of the base curriculum base that you can teach in our high schools. So that's first. Second, there are a lot of efforts at the central bank to communicate, to teach, to do that. So that's one thing that needs to be done, and this is very important. And that's the way you're going to have inclusion and make people more. Second, you need to reduce the cost. So we need to reach people if they only have one very cheap cellular phone. If they have cellular phone and they can move things, then that would be enough. Sometimes they don't have in poor countries, and Brazil has a very poor population that maybe they don't have even the cellular phone. How do you reach them? So that's one of it. Now there is a fast lane, which is a more modern way, which probably will be I will say, the future revolution, as we are talking about the revolution today, which is the central bank digital currency. What is a central bank digital currency? Today, everything is digital if you want. You deposit, you transfer. At the central bank, bank transfer to bank, it's also digital. So what does this mean, a central bank digital currency? It means that instead of being retail, instead of being done by private institutions, it can be done in terms of retail by the central bank. So you, Giba, and Thais everybody will have an account in a currency, which is not a cryptocurrency, which is a real or whatever. And this account is at the central bank. And whenever you need to transfer, you transfer it. Today, we only have accounts at the central bank from financial institutions. But with the new technology, we are able to have 200 million accounts if we want. But that's a revolution. Because what happened with the financial institutions? What happened with intermediation? What happened with assets and cryptocurrencies and all of that? This is a major issue, but it's a revolution, but it's starting because you see China, see other places which are starting. So this is the fast lane. That's the modern lane.
Ilan, it was great to see you again. And thank you so much. I know how busy you are, so I appreciate you spending the time with us. And of course, it has been a pleasure to meet Thais, Giba, Ingrid, and of course, Pedro, who I met before. Thank you so much for this outstanding conversation and sharing your perspectives on open banking, FinTechs, and online payments. Então, tenham bom jantar, uma boa noite e fiquem bem. Até outro dia, gente. Muito obrigada.